Hello everyone, I am here today to bring some attention, appreciation and very well deserved love to what I think might be pound for pound the greatest console to ever exist. At least for me. And when I say that, what I mean is, while I'm sure there are more games I like on other consoles and some more of my favourites might come from other systems, in my experience with the GameCube, comparing good to bad, this is easily the one where the good and the great and even the phenomenal win out by a landslide. I'm talking, of course, about the GameCube, which I'm sure is appreciated a lot. I'm sure a lot of people still love it, and especially some of the games. But I really don't think it gets enough appreciation. But not only did it have some amazing IPs, I think some of the best games of many of Nintendo's amazing franchises came from the GameCube. So this will mostly just be talking about some of those games and how much I loved them and how much they impacted my childhood and why I think they're the best version of the franchises. Some being pretty new, some being very long established franchises even before this. So this won't be as much of a critical examination and more about me just fawning over and gushing about what I think might be the most underappreciated console of all time. First off, let's just start with the look. Look at this thing. How can you not love the look of it? It's a cube. Obviously, the GameCube is going to be a cube, but you can get in many different colours, from purple to silver, which were my two favourites. You get black, you get orange, probably more. Purple was the most, like, the original colour, which you can see in its cute, catchy and iconic opening screen. And of course, the controller. This thing came out in 2001, and people still use the controller today. People are still upset if the controller can't be used on new Nintendo consoles. The Switch even has official hardware to use the GameCube controllers. No controller has stood the test of time quite like this. The Xbox 360 could come close, but even this was a few years before that. And of course, to go along with that, the first game I'm going to talk about, Super Smash Bros. Melee. Probably a big part of why people still want the GameCube controller when new games come out is for Super Smash Bros. Sure, for most people it probably is better, but there is still debates on if it's even better than this one. And while that debate might still rage on, I don't think people can really deny how much of a leap the GameCube version of this franchise was from the Nintendo 64 version. While it's the start of its franchise, obviously you're not going to hold too much against it. The Nintendo 64 version of Super Smash Bros., it's not even fun, I think. And I feel like most people agree with me because nobody talks about it. Nobody seems to care. And sure, you have to respect it for what it started. Not only in terms of one of the most successful franchises and fighting game crossovers, but just for being a big trailblazer in this whole crossover fighting game stuff in general. I think the leap from Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64 to the GameCube is one of the biggest jumps in quality in gaming I've ever seen. Who knows, maybe it was intentional. Start off like that so they can have one of the biggest improvements ever. But you don't need me to talk about this. Everybody knows of it. Whenever a new character is announced in this franchise over 20 years later, it's an event. Even though I don't play the game much, I know every time a character is announced in the new Switch version of this game. And of course it's expanded now much beyond just official Nintendo owned characters. Having characters from like Joker from Persona 5 or Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy 7. Who knows where it goes after this. But I know a lot of people like me are very excited to find out. I'm going to jump around a bit between popular franchises like the most well known games and kind of smaller ones, just because it feels more interesting for me, instead of sticking to talking about the same franchise for too much of it. Let's jump slightly away from Super Smash Bros. To the game from the biggest of the Nintendo franchises, Super Mario Sunshine. One of the first GameCube games I played, and I know for most this doesn't seem to be as good. A lot of people don't seem to like it as much. For me personally, it is almost side by side with Super Mario 64 for which one I like better. I'd say I like 64 a small bit better, but this is definitely my second favourite of the 3D Super Mario games. I love the environment, I love using FLUDD. Even though sometimes it can be really janky, I think he's a great character to use. I think he's a lot of fun. Some of the boss fights in this game are a ton of fun as well. The Gooper Blooper be my favourite. Something about just pulling his tentacles off. I don't know why it's so fun for me. The different nozzles you can use, like the rocket and the turbo nozzle, are an absolute blast to use, especially the turbo one. Even if some of the challenges it creates with some of the levels are kind of ridiculous and sometimes really poorly planned out, it's hard not to have fun going at this speed. And it even has random shining references. Now, this game definitely is a lot more challenging than most Mario games. Fighting that stingray is still one of the most challenging things I remember from my childhood. And some of the levels where flood is taken away from you are definitely very challenging too, and have such a weird, creepy atmosphere to them. I don't know what it is. A lot of this game has that, I think. And I definitely think it's one of the weirdest Mario games, which is saying a lot sometimes. It has such a different vibe than most of them. But even if a lot of people don't, I still think this is one of the best Mario games out there. And the final boss fight in this game, the second you get on that boat, I spent hours trying to finish that as a child. That was one of the most challenging things out there for me in this game. And while the actual fight itself might be a bit disappointing, especially compared to Super Mario 64, I think the mountain itself, the whole volcano, kind of makes up for it. What more can I say except, for me, this was a great start for the GameCube when I got it. I'm so happy I got to play it, and I'm happy I could fall in love with it too, even if it's not for everybody. I guess I could jump right from that to one of the best games on the GameCube, from one of Nintendo's biggest franchises, but maybe I'll keep that for a while. I'll keep it till later. We'll get to that first soon, because it is one of my favourite games of all time and I can't wait to talk about it. Jumping a bit away from Mario, kind of, let's talk about Luigi's Mansion. I don't think anyone expected this when it came out, but the basic plot, it's a horror kind of game, where Luigi is the main character finally, finally in a good game I mean, and he goes around sucking up ghosts in his vacuum cleaner. This is a legitimately creepy game, especially by Nintendo first party standards. The atmosphere in this game is unbelievable. It's so creepy, it's so disturbing, and I can still hear the main theme of that game, even though I haven't played this game for over 10 years at this point. It's so memorable, it's so great that it just never leaves me. Some of the boss fights in this game are terrifying, that baby is absolutely disturbing. And I know this was remade recently enough on the 3DS and it had 2 sequels, but from what I heard they got a lot more arcadey. Instead of having the mansion as your main hub to explore for the whole game. I'll probably play them at some point, but I still think Luigi's Mansion 1, while being a very beloved and popular game in its own way, I don't think gets nearly enough love. Me and my friend played through this game so many times trying to see how high our score could get, because we could also collect things like little mice and ghosts that are very easy to lose track of for the whole game. What else can I say? It's a Nintendo game that's genuinely creepy as fuck, has really great replay value, and is one of the most unique Nintendo games on the GameCube, I think, which is saying a lot. Let's change gears a little bit towards Pokemon. Back in the day, a Pokemon game on console was a very heavily requested idea on a home console, and while nowadays they're mainly focused on the Switch, until then, this was not a thing that was happening. Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2 came out, but that was just, you had them in a stadium, they'd fight. That was basically it, they had a few mini games, but that was it. And while that was cool too, it was cool as a side thing, it was very basic. It was just cool to see them in 3D, that was kind of the main thing for Stadium, I think. When Pokemon Coliseum came out, it was a full 3D, very different kind of Pokemon game, but it was still a 3D console Pokemon game with a story, with actually travelling around. You didn't just control Pokemon in battle, you could catch Pokemon, albeit in a different way. And I still think Pokemon Coliseum is one of the best Pokemon games. Definitely the best of the home console Pokemon games, not including the Switch ones because I don't know, I haven't played them. And from what I've heard, I never got a chance to play it because it was out of stock when I tried. Right now it's really expensive because it's a GameCube game, of course it is. But XD Gale of Darkness, the sequel to Coliseum, is supposed to be even better. Unfortunately, they seem to take a huge step backwards with Battle Revolution on the Wii. And while it was still fun, it was basically Pokemon Stadium again, but without mini games and with less personality, it seemed. If you just want kind of a repeat of Pokemon Stadium kind of thing where you just have battles, fine, it's fine for you. But in terms of the console Pokemon games before the Switch, Coliseum and XD, I hope, were so far beyond anything that came after, and one me and a few members of my family absolutely had a great time with. Going back to Mario for a while, because why not? What I consider to be the best Mario Kart game was on the GameCube. I know there's a lot of games come out after, and I'm sure 8 on the Switch, with all of its new locations and all of its returning characters, is great. But for me, Double Dash was easily the best one. One thing I loved about this game more than any other Mario Kart is the fact that every single character had its own unique special power up. Bowser had a giant shell he could throw back. Yoshi and Birdo had giant eggs they could throw. Mario and Luigi would have like these giant spray of fireballs they could throw back. Everyone had a unique one, and I really loved that. We really wish they brought that back again someday. And some of my favourite locations came from this game too. Baby Park is still one I absolutely love to play on. They also had these like challenge mode bosses you could, the kind of thing you could do, where you could do challenge race. If you got it good enough into time trial, you could race these ghosts to get a certain time to see if you could beat them, and they were tough. Even getting the times to get to these ghosts was tough, but beating them themselves was a whole different challenge. And I don't know if they still do that. I don't think they do. I haven't heard about it. But this is easily my favourite Mario Kart. Nothing has ever come close, and I've spent a ton of hours in this game over my life. And you know what? Even the opening title screen is still my favourite sounding. Like they just put so much effort into every tiny bit of this game.
Nintendo! Woohoo!
I suppose while I'm back in Mario, I should give a little shout out to a game I haven't personally played yet. I know it's awful. But Paper Mario A Thousand Year Door. I played the first Paper Mario bit and the Wii version, which is a completely different game, so I don't know why I'm mentioning it. And I enjoyed it quite a bit, even though I never finished it. But this is a game where if the GameCube is mentioned and good games are mentioned, this is always brought up. People are so passionate about this game so many years, like almost 20 years after it came out. For a lot of people, it is their favourite game out there. And with the exception of Super Smash Bros. Melee, I don't think that is going to apply to most of the games I talk about in this list. I can't talk much about it, but people seem to really love the story. The characters is always brought up when they're talking about new Paper Mario games too, about why it's so much better than the new ones. This is a game that has stood the test of time more than pretty much anything. People are still waiting for it to be either remastered or released, so people don't have to pay ridiculous prices for it. And people are still waiting for something to even come close to this quality from Paper Mario since. I'll definitely try it out at some point. I don't know when, but as for now, it's just another one of the many great games that people seem to love from the GameCube era. It's a time to talk about one of my favourites yet, a more controversial one, because people seem to either love this one or hate it, especially since it's not exactly what people wanted or expected from the franchise at this point. You know what, we'll get to it in a while. We'll get to it in a sec. Let's go to one of my favourite IPs from the GameCube era, and one of my favourite games of all time, Pikmin. A franchise that is still going, kinda. It just comes out every once in a while, which is good, honestly. You know what? That's great. Pikmin was the first GameCube game that was mine. I was a kid at the time, but it wasn't my brother's. It wasn't the family's game. It wasn't for everyone. This was my game for my birthday. If you have siblings, you'll understand that mentality a bit more. And it definitely helps a lot that I absolutely loved it. You're stranded on a planet, and you must use these strange little creatures called Pikmin that you control to help you get your ship parts back in exactly 30 days. Now, a lot of people don't like time limits, but for this game, I think it works perfectly. Maybe it's because I'm so used to the game, it's easy for me. But I go back to this game at least once every year or so, just for a quick playthrough, and it is just as much fun every single time. This is one of those games that if I was to make a top 10 games of all time list, this is like a guaranteed to be up there. It is such a charming, short if you know what you're doing game, with an amazing and epic finale as well, with a great final boss that just, and even a great final level that just brings everything you learn throughout the game together and really pushes you to your limit. This is a game I absolutely love, and it's one of those games I'm just absolutely passionate about how much I love it. And Pikmin 2 is great as well. I don't like it as much. They take away the time limit, so there's a lot more in it. And that can drag a bit, but it is still a great game. Don't get me wrong, it's still fucking great. And the multiplayer in this game There's really not much to it. It's just Pikmin, but you have to steal stuff from your friend to win or kill him. Me and my friend play this every once in a while. We have a great time with the multiplayer because it is a random, chaotic mess sometimes, but in the best way possible. Two games I'm not going to talk about much because they were on other systems as well. One being tied to Tasmanian Tiger 1 and 2, back when these 3D collectathon games were a bit more popular. While I liked 2 a lot more when I was younger, 1 kind of grew on me a lot more when they got remastered on the PlayStation 4. And I remember the final boss in 1 being really difficult. It was a lot of fun, but like I said, on other consoles too, so let's move on to the other one, Resident Evil 4. One of the most popular games out there. Has so many remasters it's almost competing with Skyrim, and with coming close to a remake, this game doesn't even need to be talked about. But I played it first on the GameCube. It's a lot of fun. It's one of the most popular, beloved games in the world, so let's just move on. Actually, one more that's on the GameCube but other consoles too, Sonic Mega Collection. With so many games from the Sonic franchise from 1, 2 and 3 to the Mean Bean Machine to Sphere Blue, Sonic and Knuckles, things like Ristar. Even modern Sonic collections are put to shame by this game from almost 20 years ago. Oh, it had comics, it had music videos and stuff from the back in the day. It makes modern Sonic collections like the Origins one look pathetic by comparison. I really wish they would just remaster the collection. It's such a great thing, I love it so much. And like I said, then the PS2 as well. Nothing has ever come close to touching it, so hopefully someday. But let's move on to other stuff that was only on the GameCube. And while it's a franchise I haven't actually played much of except for the first one, I think, Metroid Prime is one of the most requested to return franchises I've ever seen. I'm pretty sure 4 is supposed to be coming out actually as well, but you know, I don't think anything's been mentioned about that in years, so who even knows what's happening. But from what I remember playing it, it was fun. It's a very beloved franchise that hasn't been seen in a long time, but people are still very passionate about and can't wait to see again. The Mario Party games, which were 4, 5 and 6, some of my favourites. 4 had a cool story mode added in as well, which was weird sometimes but still a lot of fun, with a cool in its own way but still very difficult final boss kind of thing. 5 had this weird car battling mini game, which was, I feel like if I went back to it, probably suck. But back then it was fun to win more battles, upgrade your stuff, etc. I thought it was a lot of fun. And 6, it came with a microphone. Now, while it was probably one of the most underutilized accessories I've ever seen, I played this when I was like 12. I was at home sick from school. I had too much fun with it. It's only used for like 6 mini games, but talking into a microphone for a game back then, it might seem like nothing nowadays, but back then, this was unique. This was unheard of for the most part. It wasn't done a lot. But I spent a ton of time using it in those 6 mini games, which I think says a lot. Since we're getting close to the end, I'm going to talk about 2 remakes on this. One which I'm sure most people agree is one of the greatest remakes ever. One which seems to be more split, but I personally love. The Resident Evil 1 remake on the GameCube. For a while, again, I thought for the longest time was, without even close to competition, being the greatest remake out there. Of course, nowadays with stuff like the Final Fantasy VII remake or the Resident Evil 2 remake, that might not be as true anymore, and if it is, there's some competition. Back then, nothing came close. It took the campy, more silly nature of Resident Evil 1, which I'm not bashing, I love it too, I love that too. While it's a very different style, still an amazing and influential game of course, but the remake took it and made it into an actually scary as fuck game. It was darker, the Crimson Heads were terrifying, stuff like Lisa Trevor added in were absolutely horrifying. It's such a fantastic remake that even after all this time, I still have a hard time playing. And before we get to the other remake, I'll talk about Resident Evil Zero a little bit. I loved it back in the day, but after playing on PS4 and the Origins collection, it hasn't held up quite as well in the bit I've played. Maybe it'll change later on. But it still definitely has a great environment and atmosphere to it. It's still very scary, and I do love the characters. But the other remake that's a bit more controversial and split is Metal Gear Solid 1, the Twin Snakes collection. Most people don't like it, they don't like the more... It's very definitely a lot more campy and action movie-ish. But the reason I love it is because they took the mechanics from Metal Gear Solid 2, which is easily my favourite, especially gameplay wise. They added in the tranquilizer gun, And that was easily enough for me to absolutely love this remake. Even stuff like the Psycho Mantis scene. As somebody who grew up with a lot more Nintendo stuff than PlayStation stuff, it was a lot more fun for me to hear, oh, you've played Super Mario Sunshine, than it was to hear stuff like from PlayStation 1 games.
I see that you enjoy Nintendo games. So, you like adventure games? You seem to like The Legend of Zelda, don't you? You like action games? Oh, so you've played Super Smash Bros. Melee before?
And I'm sure 13-year-old me had other reasons for liking this too, especially in more clear quality, but I can't quite seem to figure those out right now. Who knows? Before I talk about my last couple of games, I also want to bring up the Game Boy Player, which let you play Game Boy Advance games on your TV. And while this was done to Super Nintendo as well, I didn't know about that at the time, so I thought this was a brand new thing. And it also turns your GameCube into an actual cube. All I know is back in the day, being able to play Pokemon Fire Red and stuff on the TV was mind blowing. Which, to be honest, looking back at that time, a TV, your average TV at that point probably wasn't much bigger than a Game Boy Advance. And now, since nowadays everything has a backlight, ever since like the DS even, it's hard to explain going from having to be in the right light with a tiny screen to be able to play something like that on your TV. It's such it's an experience I don't think could ever be replicated nowadays. But back then, that was mind blowing and made things a lot easier too. And is easily one of the best accessories for a console out there. It even had the link cable slots if you wanted to trade or do battles or stuff in games, mostly Pokemon. Alright, I think it's time to talk about one of the more controversial GameCube games that some people do like a lot, but definitely shifted people's expectations and took things in a different direction what they expected. I am talking, of course, about Star Fox Adventures. Yeah, most people seem to not enjoy this game because people loved the Nintendo 64 and Super Nintendo games from this, which was more focused on like a rail shooting ship combat. This is my favourite Star Fox game by far. Maybe it's because that kind of ship flying is not something I'm that into. I mean, I played Star Fox on the Super Nintendo for a little while. The reason for a mini pause there, because I can't. It's called Star Wing in Europe. I can't remember if it has different names overseas. And I think it's well known at this point that this is kind of just a reskin of what I'm pretty sure was going to be called Dinosaur Planet. I don't know. Maybe it's because I didn't even know any of that at the time. I just think this game is a lot of fun. I like the puzzles, I like the gameplay enough, I love the world. And I actually played through this game around a year ago and I still absolutely love it. Yeah, it has problems. And it's easily more, like, out of any game that I like that other people don't, I don't think there's one that I can understand the hate for more than this one. If I was expecting another proper Star Fox game and got this and I liked the other Star Fox games, yeah, this would be a horrible disappointment. So, yeah, I understand the dislike for this game, but for me, it's a game I love, and still get excited every time I find somebody else who likes it too. Which is admittedly a very rare experience. I think it's happened like twice in my life, but I can't help it. But now, guys, let's get to the actual game I've been teasing throughout this whole video. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Now, this game seems to be split. A lot of people hate the graphics, especially at the time it came out. I think it definitely softened a lot over the years and people appreciate it a bit more. But this is easily my favourite Zelda game. Ocarina of Time is obviously the biggest one that came before this, but for me, they're almost on the same level. I just like this one and I have a bit more nostalgia for this one as well. And there's just a lot of things I love about it. As you can see, the art style in this game took a lot more of a cartoony approach, which not only do people not like as much, a little while before this came out they showed off a trailer that was really more realistic and gritty. So it wasn't not really a trailer, more like a tech demo kind of thing. So that's what people were expecting. So getting this was not only kind of a bait and switch for some people. A lot of them just didn't like the more cartoony, childish looking nature of it. But for me, this is a giant open world where you can explore the whole sea. And a lot of people probably don't like, I don't think, like that you have to go from place to place manually. It can take a while. I always thought it was very relaxing and chill. Sometimes I intentionally went slower just to enjoy the environment. There was a ton of secret locations in this game too to find when you were sailing around, with unexpected giant squid battles coming up every once in a while too. The story of this game is easily one of my favourites. The characters are great. Some of the mini games are a ton of fun. Beadle is one of the greatest merchants in gaming history as far as I'm concerned. And even if it might not be for a lot of people, even if a lot of people don't like it as much and they have problems with it, I absolutely love everything about this game from start to finish. It even got 2 sequels on the DS. One which was okay, Phantom Hourglass was fine. In its own weird way, Spirit Tracks, the second sequel, is one of my favourite Zelda games. I don't know why. It's really stupid. Ganon is a train and it's dumb. But I can't help but love it. Suppose I'll talk a bit quickly about Twilight Princess as well, which was also on the Wii, and that is where I played it. I thought it was fun. That's definitely a bit more gritty and dark from what people probably wanted, especially at the time of Wind Waker. But it's not really one of my favorite. I like it. I got like one of the last temples in the game and something out my save files, and that was it for me. I couldn't go back after that. Hopefully someday I'll finish it because it does look cool, and it has been so long. There was also a Zelda collection, because of course there fucking was. The GameCube was the best. It had Zelda 1, 2, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. It also had like it had a 20-minute demo for Wind Waker, which was the first time I got to play it. But every game here, all the little things about it, everything from the look to the controller to the accessories like the Game Boy Player, I hope I could show a bit of why I absolutely love this console. And like I said, there's probably more games on other consoles I played and enjoyed more. But with the GameCube, the only game that comes to my head that I didn't like that I played on out of everything I talked about is one of the Sims games. It was like the Herbs, Sims, and the Cities. The only thing that comes to my head that I can think of where I was like, no, this is bad. Hope I did an okay job of expressing how much I love this console and why. Like I said, some of the best games from some of my great franchises. My favourite Zelda games, one of my favourite Mario games in the my favourite Mario Kart game. Probably my favourite home console Pokemon game. And yes, people do love the GameCube and a lot of the games, but I really, really think it doesn't get enough. And like I said, there's plenty of consoles where I probably like more games and have some of my favourite games. But out of all these games I could talk about with some of my favourite games in the franchises, but only one game that I can mention that I don't like, that's an accomplishment. Even with other consoles I play a lot more, I can point out many games that I played that I don't like, that don't have some of my favourite games from those franchises. The GameCube was a charming little console that came out and just decided, yeah, I'm going to put some of the best shit ever out here. And then it's just going to kind of quietly leave. Because realistically, the GameCube really didn't last very long. While it came out in 2001, the Wii came out in 2006, which I never realized how that's such a small shelf life. But it's in that tiny amount of time, it managed to churn out so much great stuff. And I really think that is why it is probably the best console of all time. And how could you not love anything with these little discs? I mean, look at these things. The first time I showed my friend one of these, he was blown away. He couldn't believe it because it's the cutest little thing. Anyway, I've gushed about the GameCube for long enough. Let me know if you love it as much as I do. Do you still have one? Did I miss any of the most iconic games on the console? Does anyone else have Star Fox Adventures as much as I do? Thank you so much if you watched this. I can't really recommend you go buy a GameCube because the games are so expensive, but if you still have one and a lot of the games for it, you are very lucky. Thank you so much for watching and see you for the next one. Goodbye.